If this book exists, you're in the wrong universe. Date unknown. Food unknown. Hunger unknown. Me. The sauce, aka Shadow Jizz, or Armis sauce, or whatever we were calling it now, is a drug in the same way that a landmine is a pedicurist. It creates a sensation of detachment from time and space by actually detaching you from time and space. If life is a video game, the sauce is a hack that glitches you through all the levels and then causes a meteor to fall on your house. My first sensation after watching the blackness crawl across the whorls of my thumb was a bunch of information fleeing my head. Like when you walk into a room and suddenly forget why. Next, there was an odor. It was the sickeningly sweet scent of coconut, or rather, the chemical they put in suntan lotion to trigger that association in the brain. For me, it wasn't the smell of the beach, but of the video store where I'd worked after graduation. There was a tanning salon next door run by the same owners, and the sweet, tropical stink of the baking customers was so strong that it had lingered in my khaki work pants long after I'd quit the job. To this day, the scent triggers memories of mean drunks arguing about late fees. And then my sight came back, and I was in the sky, flapping leathery wings and looking down from bird height at that video store and its tiny parking lot with the Dairy Queen across the street. I was rising fast, the streets and neighborhoods shrinking until the whole town was in view. A black line, thin as a strand of raven hair, drew itself out from the center of my vision. Then it spawned bristles and branches and grids, laying out a complex design that was beginning to look familiar, even though I no longer recalled where I'd seen it. It was something about a magic book and, I think, a missing charging cable. I blinked. Or maybe the world blinked around me, and suddenly I was back at my apartment above the porno store, standing in the living room area. But it was a little off. There were unfamiliar curtains on the windows, and outside those windows there were customer cars in the parking lot, like the store below was still open. Then I blinked again, and the cars disappeared, and the apartment was more like the one I knew. Only the kitchen table was different, and the counters were buried under drifts of trash. I saw maggots on a plate of half-eaten macaroni. Then I blinked again, and I was in a small house, the bungalow I had lived in several years ago, the one that, like so many structures in the city, had burned down in an event the news would call a mass panic. But I was in a version of that house that had never existed, one with a current model television and a fresh coat of paint on the walls. It was as if that house had managed to survive those events, and as a result, I apparently was still living there. I glimpsed a framed photo on the wall of Amy and me at Disney World? Really? Blink. I was now in a dilapidated version of that house that seemed to have 5 strangers living in it. One person sleeping on the sofa, 2 on the floor. A man was yelling from the kitchen that someone had eaten his leftovers. Blink. I was in a tiny apartment that was unfamiliar to me. The walls were plastered with thousands of clippings from magazines and printouts of internet articles. The only piece of furniture was a computer desk with 4 monitors. I thought I saw myself hunched over in front of it, but blink. I was now in a trailer and could hear at least 2 screaming babies. A football game on TV had been cranked up to drown out the sound. Someone was on the sofa, and it looked like blink. I was in a neat, middle-class house. Not a mansion, but a respectable place where a husband and wife would live if, say, one was a school teacher and the other an insurance salesman. I heard gentle laughter from the next room, and I turned, or shifted my view, somehow, again I had no sense that I was physically there, to see a dining table, and at least 6 people sipping wine over a finished meal. A dinner party. The kind that you always see on TV, but that I assumed never happened in real life. I heard multiple small children playing nearby. Had I fallen into one of those prescription drug commercials where they show you what your life can look like once you get your Crohn's disease under control? Then I saw that eating at the table was Fancy David, that cleaned up, bearded version of myself who had visited me in the night, though the details of that visit were now fuzzy in my memory. I could also see Amy. From where I stood, I could only catch a freckled shoulder, but in a fancy dress she did not own, and wouldn't wear if she did. I didn't recognize any of the other voices. I didn't see or hear John. I tried to take a step in that direction, but of course I couldn't move. I wasn't actually here, and here didn't actually exist, and yet I made eye contact with Fancy David, and just for a moment, he reacted like he was seeing something impossible, yet oddly familiar. He stood up from the table, politely excusing himself in a way that I never would, then stepped into the room where I was/wasn't. Then the house vanished from around him, but he remained. I was now in John's house, in the upstairs bathroom, face to face with this other version of me. Somehow, we were in mid-conversation. He was saying, "I don't know if you'll even remember this. I was there, at the first feeding with the teeth. I watched it happen and saw your face go blank. I think that was me. I think me being there messed it up, made you glitch ahead in the timeline." I heard a question come out of my mouth. "Wait, back up. How are you here?" Then I was momentarily confused, because why was I here? But that was a stupid question. I was in John's bathroom. It was Sunday evening. The magpie was asking for strawberry popsicles. Its hunger meter had tipped over 70%, and we still had no plan. We knew Bass and his weird friends would be at the Dollar Cinema, but had no idea what to expect or how to approach the problem. Then I'd gone up to take a piss and found this fancy version of myself watching me. He said, "There's no time to explain." "Nope, sorry," I heard myself say. "Put $1 in the no time to explain jar. It's always worth it to explain." He seemed frustrated by this, but somehow knew I was right. He took a moment to gather himself, then said, "When I first came into contact with the sauce, I saw, mapped out before me, a whole lot of paths that all converged in the same place. That place is very bad, and I am trying to avoid going there. So I am hopping from path to path, trying to understand the bigger picture. The paths are alternate realities. You're in one of them. There are others. Many of them are living nightmares. I think if we can fix this, then all the timelines consolidate to just one. The good one." It seems like that was actually really easy to explain. So that thing where we skipped ahead in time, you're saying that was you? You're saying that was you. I'm watching your timeline like a movie, and I can fast forward it whenever I want. When you skipped ahead earlier, when doing the feeding with the teeth, I had the thought in my head that I wanted to skip forward, and then it did. Only you skipped with it. Are you saying you fast forwarded our entire reality because you got bored? I didn't do it on purpose. I don't have buttons I can push. But right now, I know the next thing that happens, because it's always the same, and I'm eager to get to it. If that causes me to jump ahead, I'm afraid you'll jump with it. I think the longer I stay here, the more likely that becomes. Thus, there's no time to explain. I asked, "So what should we do tonight?" Though on some level I knew it was a nonsense question, because it had already happened. Right? It's going to get its tons. The Cimmeri already have them. Swallow will hatch. All of that happens, in every timeline. You can't stop it any more than you can stop the world from turning. So you're saying we have to kill Swallow after it comes out. The fact that you think you can do that, despite what I've been saying, doesn't surprise me. Of course, you're me. I'm you. No, I'm pretty sure you're not. So how are we supposed to... And then he was gone. I turned to leave the bathroom, to tell John and Amy what I had learned, but of course that was pointless. This was 24 hours ago. We'd already gone to the theater. Already had the whole thing play out just as Fancy Me had said, including the part where we skipped forward without our memories. Then, the bathroom changed around me. The picture on the wall over the toilet, a cartoon turd with a word bubble saying, "Shit's about to go down," turned into a painting of flowers. Then, The house was erased from around me, as if a shockwave had puffed it away like a dandelion. I was left in a vacant lot under a strobe flash of day-night cycles, surrounded by rubble. Then, after some unknown amount of time, a large concrete foundation covered the entirety of the lot and those surrounding it, overtaking John's old neighborhood completely. Girders and walls and glass appeared, and then I was rising, as if floors were being built beneath me and carrying me upward. Soon, I was surrounded by offices full of workers in booths, communicating with clients via banks of video screens. Then they were gone, along with their cubicles, and the building appeared to be abandoned. I watched windows grow grimy with dirt that apparently no one was responsible for cleaning. Saw tiles overhead turn brown with water damage. Graffiti appeared on the walls, none of it comprehensible to me. I saw repeated use of a symbol, a letter X painted in red, with a pair of black curves on the top and bottom to turn it into an infinity symbol. I waited for the world to zip away again, but this one lingered, as if we were now on play instead of fast forward. I scanned the vacant office space, finally noticing that the floor was covered with decaying corpses. No, not corpses. Living people, if you could call them that. Their chests were rising and falling ever so slowly, like they were all in hibernation. Their spindly limbs seemed incapable of supporting their weight should they try to stand, their skin pale and papery. There were dozens of them scattered around the floor, on old cushions and folded blankets. Their faces were covered by those clear plastic masks I'd seen on the shoppers during my hallucination earlier in the day, only these had grown cloudy with filth and scratches, still with data scrolling and blinking faintly across them. The living corpses all had IVs in their arms, the clear plastic tubes snaking over to nearby attachments on the floor. I heard a grunt and saw the living corpse closest to me, almost touching where my feet would be had I actually been standing there, was moving. Its limbs flailed slowly, like gravity was too much for it, the way a baby struggles to get off its back. He was reaching up for the mask, and I noticed that the skin around it was oozing and encrusted, as if the mask hadn't been removed for months or years. He pawed at the mask like he was trying to get it off, like it was suffocating him. A strap that was holding it on had turned brittle and crumbled at the slightest pull, and he was able to get the mask off himself. His face came off with it. I saw pink, twitching muscle stretched across bone and heard the man screaming, and then... blink. I was in a classroom full of bored teenagers. Outside the window, approaching across the lawn, was a single figure, entirely black, but with burning orange eyes. It strode slowly but purposefully toward the school, invisible to everyone there until it reached the window and passed through without a pause. In its wake, the world changed. The windows were bricked over, the doors replaced with bars, the students replaced with a moaning, tangled crowd of starving, naked prisoners. Blink. I stopped hallucinating and found things had gone back to normal. I was back at work, at my desk, the surface vaguely greasy and gritty under my hands. I sensed that there was a stink in the air that I couldn't smell, like it was there, but I was breathing it through a nose that had gotten used to it long ago. There was a bundle of stapled sheets of paper on the desk that had been snow white when they'd been delivered, but were now mottled with my own smudgy fingerprints. The din from outside my office was deafening. I couldn't think. Something had gotten the pigs riled up. The noise of this place was worse than the stench. The stink you could adjust to. The shrieks and the howls and the groans never faded into the background because they were constantly changing. My guts were stewing in anticipation of an argument I was about to have, one with probably an 80% chance of turning into a brawl. I'd welcome it. It'd break up the boredom. The fight was going to be with that fat fuck Mauser. It was day shift's job to clean out the drains, and he, as the day manager, swore up and down to the bosses that he'd clean them like he was told, but every night they'd back up with shit and hair and everything else that got rinsed out of the pens, and we'd have to go snake them out. So after last shift, I left a bottle in the front of the valve. right where you'd have to move it if you were going in to clean. And what do you know? I get in at midnight, and there's the bottle, undisturbed. And here's the log saying the drain was cleaned. My shift ends at noon. That's when Mauser gets in. And when he does, I'm going to fill that bottle with sludge from the drain and pour it on his big fat head. Then we'll see what happens after that. The pigs were more stirred up than ever, kicking on the metal doors and howling their incoherent noises. That meant they had too much energy, which meant they were overfed, and we could skip lunch. That was my call. Maybe I'd feed them anyway, let them stay stirred up for day shift. Or maybe mix in the rancid rations from the broken freezer and let Mauser deal with a diarrhea outbreak all day. Maybe he didn't like cleaning because he didn't get enough practice. Maybe I should give it to him. What are you smiling at? Zig had shown up in the office at some point. I'm happy. I love my job. What's got the swine so riled up? Screws cut the tons out of a couple. Just for fun or on orders? Orders. Guess the screws dragged them out of their pens and did it out on the floor where the rest could see. Now they're all going nuts. Yeah, that'll do it. Thinking about skipping lunch. It'll make them mad for a while, but then they'll get sleepy. Don't have to ask me twice. It's fish meal day. If I don't have to put my hands in that slime, then that's a win. Did you fix the lock on B66 yet? First I'm hearing of it. If the lock is broken, why aren't the pigs running all over the place? There were 12 of them stuffed into that particular cage. It's busted the other way. It won't unlock. There was a moment where I had a strange out-of-body feeling. Like, for a moment I forgot who I was or why I was there. Did I know how to fix a stuck lock in this place? Where was this place? I squeezed my eyes shut and blinked, even though there wasn't a damned thing wrong with my vision. Of course I knew where I was. This was Purity Camp Bravo. I came on as a janitor and worked my way up to night warden through pure attrition, after the last one got cholera and crapped himself to death. I pulled a dented metal case off a shelf behind me and opened it up. I cursed out loud. All sorts of tools missing. The good flat screwdriver, the good wire strippers, the good needle-nose pliers. Somebody on day shift had probably borrowed them to fix the monitor in the employee cafeteria and left them on the floor, because why take the extra 1 minute of effort to put them back? I gathered up the next best tools, wondering if maybe I shouldn't stuff something sharp in my pocket for Mauser. I decided against it. I went down the hall, and there again was that floaty feeling, like I didn't know where I was going, like I had never been here before. But again, it passed. My feet were already turning right, toward the B block, and when I came to a heavy steel door, I knew which of my keys opened it, and the door behind it, and the door behind it. I stepped out onto the floor, the rows of grated doors on each side of me, another row above, a third above that. The pigs were chanting slogans and taunts at me. I had no idea what they were saying, and definitely didn't care. I found the supposedly broken cell, and there was a scuffle of boots behind me, and suddenly my arms were being wrenched back. 2 of the B block guards had grabbed me, and I thought they were doing a prank, but then I heard Mauser's voice back there somewhere. So which is it, Wally? That was his nickname for me. I had no idea what it meant. Are you a sympathizer, or just incompetent? Not that the result is any different. What the fuck are you talking about? Get your fucking hands off me. The guards shoved me down the hall until we passed through yet another door, the one leading into the solitary box, and the bank of coffin-sized vert cells. I saw the third one on the right, saw that it was empty, and my stomach dropped. Mauser said, "Mind telling us where she went?" And here I had that floating sensation again, that I both knew and didn't know, that all of this was both strange to me and intimately familiar. I heard myself say, "Who?" But on some level, I knew it was a lie of a question, a stalling tactic. The ginger pig that got put in here after her third escape attempt, who was supposed to stay in here until there wasn't enough left to want to escape or do anything else. The one you kept feeding after a starvation order. You sneak her home in your lunchbox. "You're full of shit," I heard myself say. But of course, I had in fact rigged the lock. The bolt was misaligned by a millimeter, but I had set it so that it wouldn't throw up an error in the guard booth when it failed to slide into place. I made sure that it would appear to fail in the exact way these janky locks failed all the time on their own. And here I got really confused, because there was no logic behind this decision in any circumstance, considering the best possible outcome from an escape would be if she got caught in the hallway and stuck back in the cell, only with both legs and both arms broken. I said, "These locks break faster than they can be fixed, you moron, and if a pig got out, it's probably running around the C-tunnel or crouched in a pipe access. Check the tracker and get off my dick." "Tracker comes back no signal. Either it made it out of the building or dug out its tracker, and nobody can find either one. You've lost a pig, Wally. Even worse, you let one out. You know what that means, right?" And in that moment, I tried to process two thoughts at once. The first being the full realization of what that did mean if the tribunal agreed with Mauser. That it meant having my hands and feet cut off and the rest of me stuffed into one of these cells. That betraying the cause meant I was worse than a pig. The second thought was that somehow, some way, she had made it out. Had slipped through 3 locked doors and past 2 guard booths and the gun towers in the yard. And I thought that maybe, if that miracle had occurred, that whatever else happened was okay. That maybe she would live and have kids and tell them about me, even though she never knew my name. I had just enough time to feel the impact of a billy club across the back of my skull before I blacked out and,